Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on today's solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. This is the final boarding call, so I cordially invite you to claim your seat, fasten your seat belts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, before I jump into the main topic of discussion for today's program, there's a little airline story I want to throw out there. This comes out of Fox 5 in New York. Passengers tied up and held down an unruly passenger on a diverted Detroit flight. Authorities had diverted a flight headed from New York to Chicago to Detroit Metropolitan Airport on Thursday night due to an unruly passenger or disruptive passenger. This was United Flight 3461, which landed at approximately 8 p.m. at the airport in Romulus, Michigan. The plane from LaGuardia Airport was carrying 69 passengers along with some 4 crew members. According to passenger Bob Fitzsimmons, the incident started when a young woman, Brianna Farquharson, began fighting with a flight attendant and ripped a necklace from her neck, scratching the flight attendant's lip. A criminal complaint has been filed and says that Farquharson also assaulted a passenger by grabbing the passenger's shirt collar and necklace, and also broke that necklace as well. Fitzsimmons stated that he and a few other passengers ran to Farquharson and subdued her while she kept yelling and rambling on about unrelated topics. Fitzsimmons went on to say that they eventually were able to restrain Farquharson with seatbelt expanders, scarves, and waist belts. They had to resort to this as the flight crew had no devices or an air marshal aboard to restrain the unruly passenger. You know, if United Flight 3461 had our first Air Marshal Nelson Ward on board, this wouldn't have been a problem. Anyway, the passenger, being Fitzsimmons, noted that Farquharson's voice sounded demonic, and he also claimed that she must have been having some sort of psychotic episode. After 50 minutes, the pilot announced over the intercom that the flight had been diverted to Detroit. Police came aboard once the plane landed and hauled the woman off in handcuffs. After the removal, the plane continued to O'Hare International Airport, arriving a little over an hour late. But it could have been a lot worse. Meanwhile, the deviant has been charged with assaulting and intimidating a flight crew member and passenger. So, I want to give a little shout out to our buddies at the TSA for doing a good job in conducting a full background check on this passenger, and wonder whether this is an example of how well President Obama's proposed gun-grabbing executive orders might work. Folks, what it shows is that none of these sorts of screening activities are effective. And it also demonstrates that the best way to keep someone safe, whether on an airplane or in life generally, is to rely on the people. The people are the best source of defense against violence or any other threat. Of course, this won't cross the regime's mind. All right, now on to the main in-flight entertainment. I know that you are all raring to hear this, folks, so I'm not going to cut any corners. I'm just going to jump in. So, folks, if you thought things were going to get easier for Madam Clinton in the wake of Emailgate, you best grab onto your trousers and hang on for dear life, because you're in for one hell of a ride. As I'm sure you are all aware, Emailgate is the controversy surrounding Madam Clinton's use of a private email server kept in a loft bathroom to conduct her government business, and presumably to keep control over her correspondence during her tenure as Secretary of State. You know, I've always found that amazing about Hillary. She always acts in such a way as she thinks that the rules don't apply to her, that a separate code of conduct applies to her simply because of who she is. That is elitist mentality at its worst, and it clearly demonstrates that she is not qualified to hold the office of President of the United States of America. Nevertheless, she's going to continue to double down on her attempts to say that she did nothing wrong or that she didn't know about it. You know, the typical things that we see out of this regime's playbook when it comes to matters of such staggering importance as this. But the email server scandal, just like the Benghazi scandal, doesn't seem to be going away. Irrespective of efforts like from the likes of someone like Elijah Cummings to basically say that it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. It absolutely matters because it has a direct impact not only on her qualifications to hold the highest office in the land, but also whether she engaged in criminality. You know, these things are very important, and we shouldn't just sweep it under the rug like Senator Nerdface Boyne Me Sanders wants to do. We have to be open and alert to the real possibilities of what these actions show. If she has poor judgment, which all of this clearly indicates that she does, it makes you wonder whether she would exercise good judgment in the face of any type of foreign policy calamity or crisis that will surely arise in her tenure as president. And I know I'm speaking hypothetically here, folks, because I don't think she's going to get it. But you know that these problems are going to arise because of the leading from his behind that Obama has done in this current regime. And Hillary would just be a mere continuation of the failed foreign and domestic policies of Barack Hussein Obama. I mean, let's face it, folks, there's really no way around that. That is just reality. And it would be an unmitigated disaster if Hillary were to become president of the United States. And so we see that she doesn't believe that she has to follow the rules. But as I have stated on numerous past episodes of the Wright Flyer, the United States of America is a nation of laws, not of men, meaning that the law applies equally to us all, irrespective of whether we are a government official or not. But that's clearly not the manner in which the Clinton camp looks at things. They look at things as though Hillary, due to her, I don't know if we want to call it public service, due to her peculiarities and identity, rather, should be somehow exempt from the law. Now, that sort of thinking is diabolical in nature. It goes against the very strain of what our founding fathers envisioned for this country when they ratified the Constitution over 2 centuries ago. It also shows that there is a reckless abandon with approach to the way the law is to be enforced. If we got Hillary Clinton, the type of basic chaos and anarchy that we've seen with this Obama regime would continue unabated. Now, folks, we really should not accept that line of thinking in this country because it is detrimental to everything that is good and decent about the country, and it will clearly inhibit the country from entering into a renaissance. You know, as Jeremy and I have said so many times, that if we ever want to see this country experience a renaissance and to return to its rightful place in history, then we are going to have to go back to a strict adherence of not only the natural law tenets that underpin our shared Constitution, but also to the Constitution itself. We have got to return the government to a strict adherence to the scope and application of government as outlined, defined, and, yes, mandated by the Constitution. Because as we all know, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Now, I know Hillary and others are going to try and say, well, look, the Constitution is antiquated. It's a quaint document that really has no application in the modern world. And, some went even further to say, if we go back to the Constitution, we're going to oppress women and minorities. Except, no, not really. We have not operated in a fashion where women are prohibited from voting. If we went back to the Constitution, these people forget that there is the 19th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment, and the 14th, and the 13th Amendment. And therefore, going back to strict adherence to the Constitution wouldn't deny women the right to vote. It wouldn't be a war on minorities. This is all just a bunch of malarkey designed to basically claim that those types of amendments were never included in the Constitution. But as Article 5 of the Constitution clearly states, those amendments are absolutely, unquestionably part of our shared Constitution. Therefore, that argument is a red herring at best. It is a straw man put forth by these radical, salivating, left-wing extremists in an attempt to divert attention away from the fact that they are actually pushing forth an agenda to tear apart the Constitution. That is the reality that they don't want you to know. So, back to Hillary's little email problem. So, the shocking thing about what she's doing here is that private email servers are not equipped to handle sensitive information, and it may very well have placed our national security at substantial and significant risk. But there's more to it than that alone. It once again clearly demonstrates that Madam Clinton simply believes that the rules don't apply to her, as I was saying before. She's of the mindset that the people should abide by overzealous regulations, while she should be exempt from it. That's just beyond belief. But it is par for the course with the Clintonian school of hypocrisy. And let's face it, folks, we really are witnessing the Clintonian school of hypocrisy on full display for everyone to see. They are doubling down on their efforts to try and paint her as some victim because of her gender, when nothing could be further from the truth. There is no war on women, as the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media would like to have us all believe. It's all bunk. It's all just a bunch of malarkey, designed once again to obfuscate the truth and to push forward with this radical, twisted, utopian socialist agenda that the mainstream media and the Clintons and all members of the Democratic Socialist Party want to force upon this country, irrespective of the detrimental impact that it will have on the country. So, we know that she is clearly thinking that she's above the law. And, there's a pattern with respect to the Clintons when it comes to this sort of thing. It reminds me of the late Sandy Berger, who died back on December 2nd, 2015. I had not known that, but so apparently he has passed away. Anyway, I'm sure you all recall that Berger was the one who absconded with classified documents in October 2003 from a National Archives reading room prior to testifying before the 9/11 Commission. There were 5 copies of the same document, which was classified, and it covered internal assessments of the Clinton administration's handling of the unsuccessful 2000 Millennium Attack plots. So what we see there is the 9/11 Commission was trying to get down to how 9/11 could have happened. And Sandy Berger, being a very loyal acolyte of the Clinton regime, wanted to make sure that his boss's failings and shortcomings didn't come to light. And so he was willing to commit any crime to shield Bill Clinton from any of this negative light. And it just, that's the kind of corruption that the people loathe and despise. That is the type of corruption that makes people feel completely disenfranchised with their government. And I don't blame them for that, but it also raises the question of whether we want to return to that sort of irresponsible behavior, which we would most certainly get should we return Madam Clinton back to the White House, and this time as president. And, the same thing with her failed health care bill. She's already said that she wants to double down on Obamacare. Well, that's been an unmitigated disaster for America and her citizens. See, this is the type of continuation that America really cannot afford. And it's the type of situation that America should not be placed in. And then to add icing to the cake, if you will, these email scandals and the Benghazi scandals and all of her other duplicitous behavior is just swirling around her non-stop. So anyway, Berger not only took those documents back in 2003, he also lied to investigators when questioned about the removal of said documents. Ultimately, in April 2005, Berger pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge of unauthorized removal and retention of classified material from the National Archives in Washington. Again, do we see that something that really should be a felony is being put forward as a misdemeanor? Yes, we see that there has been a separate niche in the law cut out for the Clintons and their fanatical acolytes. Had Berger been unconnected with the Clinton camp, meaning having no connection with them in any way, shape, or form, I have a feeling the penalty would have been much more severe. But that's the thing, folks. When it comes to the Clintons and their allies, there really is a separate code of conduct that applies. The entire system seems to bend over backwards for these crooks, and it continues to this very day. So, what's all the hubbub about Madam Clinton's latest document dump with State Department documents which were stored and maintained on her private email server during her tenure as Secretary of State for the Obama regime? Well, according to John R. Schindler, writing for the Observer News in a piece entitled Hillary's Email Gate Goes Nuclear, Does the Latest Release of Hillary's State Department Emails Include Highly Classified U.S. Intelligence? Well, let me stop right there. Of course it does. Does anyone look at this with a sense of surprise? Because I'm going to tell you right here and right now, they shouldn't. If she was engaging all of her business and stored all of her electronic correspondence on that private server, you know that just due to the nature of the job of Secretary of the State, that there would be classified documents there. And of course, as we all know, private servers don't meet the same security standards and encryption standards that the federal government meets. And folks, this is the type of thing that we could bring up with Marxist Dubio Rubio and El Jefe Jebe Bush, who want to basically give the National Security Agency unfettered, warrantless access to the private information of American citizens. Hey, look, guys, we shouldn't give up encryption, and we shouldn't let the NSA handle things. I mean, clearly, our private email servers are secure enough. Just look at what Secretary of the State Hillary Clinton did. If she was able to use her private email servers, then we should keep our information private, too. I have a feeling that they wouldn't accept that argument. I have a feeling that argument wouldn't sit well with them whatsoever. But the fact of the matter is, that could be an argument to be made. Anyway, back to Schindler's piece here. He basically states that the latest release of over 3,000 pages of emails includes at least 66 quote-unquote unclassified messages, which the State Department has subsequently determined all were actually classified and sensitive in nature. It is important to note that all but one of the 66 documents in question were deemed confidential. Now, confidential status is the lowest classification level. That said, one of the documents was actually secret, just one step below top secret, which is a much higher threshold. This now brings the total number of secret documents discovered thus far to 7. Now, while that may seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things, you have to remember that this was on a private email server stored in the bathroom of a loft apartment in Denver, Colorado. I wouldn't exactly call that Fort Knox-style security. I can't call that Fort Knox-style security because it's not. It's a server in a bathroom. What was to prevent somebody walking in and absconding with that? What if somebody broke into the apartment and just ran off with the server? You see, these are the types of questions that really should be asked, but are not being asked with respect to Emailgate. So anyway, 7 documents of the secret classification were located, stored, and maintained on Hillary's private email server stored in that bathroom. What's more is that despite Hillary's claim that she had no classified materials on her server, there are in all 1,340 emails which have subsequently been reassessed as classified. Now, folks, why would they reassess something as classified? Why would it be released as non-classified and then reassessed? Is it that they are absolutely attempting to cover for Madam Clinton here? I think the answer is absolutely yes. They are attempting to cover for Clinton. And that is part of the heart of the problem of everything that we're seeing with respect to the Clintons. It clearly speaks to the reason as to why I don't think she's qualified to hold the office of President of the United States. And the United States of America is clearly, unquestionably, a nation of laws and not of men. Certain individuals, just because of their title or their rank or whatever their employment might be or who they're related to, that should have no bearing as to whether or not the law applies in an equitable fashion to them. Equal protection of the law requires that it applies equally to all of us, irrespective of any of those extraneous circumstances or conditions. So, 1,340 emails have subsequently been reassessed as classified. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. So, once again, there can be no question that Team Clinton is engaged in obfuscation of the truth and are attempting to cover up the illicit activities of their beloved matriarch. And, it fits right into the type of pattern that we saw with Sandy Berger and with some of the various other Clinton scandals dating back to the 90s. And it's not the only scandal that Hillary has following around her like some lost puppy dog. Everything she touches just kind of turns into excrement. And that is the way of the Clintons. It's been the way of the Clintons since they held the White House back in the 90s, and it goes back to Bill's tenure as the governor of the state of Arkansas. But the mainstream media, those graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, will do everything in their power to cover up for Madam Clinton to ensure that she gets a quote-unquote fair shake and fair reporting for her bid to the White House. But, of course, nothing could be further from the truth. So, it means that, as ever, the Clintons are lying to the American public, to the congressional investigators, and are living up to their rather seedy yet well-deserved reputation. But who is surprised by this? You'd have to be living under a rock or a die-in-the-wool utopian socialist to believe that the Clintons are not up to to bad things, that they're up to no good. That's been their track record going all the way back to Slick Willie's time as governor of the state of Arkansas, as I've already mentioned. Time and again, there's always subterfuge around the Clintons somewhere. Someone is always attempting to cover for them, keeping them safe from criminal allegations and the sort of scrutiny that they rightfully deserve. But as the evidence continues to mount against Madam Clinton, the question becomes whether this is an email too far. Quite frankly, I doubt it. Under this regime, under Barack Hussein Obama, none of their agents who have acted in a wrongful or criminal fashion have once been held accountable. You know, that's the new normal with the Obama regime. Think back to all of the scandals that have surrounded Obama, all of the devious and nefarious things that this regime has done, and see if you can point out a time when anyone has ever been held accountable for their actions. Well, I can tell you right here and right now, they haven't been, nor will they be. This is the most outrageous criminal regime of living memory. Now, that's not to say that Obama's the worst president. I think that title aptly goes to Abraham Lincoln. But with that in mind, we know why the American people are so disenfranchised with the government right now. And it is because the Clintons have this blatant disregard for the rule of law. It's as though no one is keeping tabs on things. And then, to add insult to injury, the gutless opposition party has been a do-nothing majority. They have the power to subpoena, hold in contempt of Congress, and withhold funding until this gets resolved. But, you know, under the tenure of Darrell Issa, Operation Gunrunner and Fast and Furious that was under investigation, that never got resolved. Then further, under the toothless bulldog Trey Gowdy, again, nothing is getting resolved with Benghazi. Nothing was resolved with the IRS targeting scandal. Nothing has been resolved when these gutless opposition party members are in power, and the American people are absolutely sick and tired of it. And who can blame them? This is a government out of control. It is a government that is operating outside the proper scope and application of government as outlined, defined, and mandated by our shared Constitution, and it just goes to show that there literally is a separate code of conduct that applies to the elitists that currently hold the reins of political power than from the rest of us who, need I remind you, we the people are the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this country as per the natural law tenets that underpin our entire representative Republican form of government. But that doesn't matter with people like the Clintons. And it certainly doesn't matter with this regime. And so we see that the gutless opposition party could have handled this and any of the scandals plaguing the Clinton camp, or the Obama regime for that matter, as an open and shut case. But no, they don't want to. They just want to give the full funding to the Obama administration, like we saw with Speaker of the House Benedict Arnold, Paul Ryan. They just give everything over to the Democrats and then wring their hands in front of the salivating mainstream media and say, woe is me, henny penny, the sky is falling, and it's just this administration. Well, yes, the regime is mostly to blame, but there is a lot of blame to go around, especially when you, the gutless opposition party, are doing nothing to rein in this out-of-control federal government. That is a major problem. But it doesn't seem to matter to the political powers that be. And, you know, part of the reason that this isn't an open and shut case is because it involves Madam Clinton, the former First Lady, under one of the most corrupt and inept presidential regimes in the history of the United States. The darling matriarch of the left will be protected. Now, though, I think it's getting harder to cover it up. And if things continue at this rate, she will face some serious baggage in the run-up to the 2016 elections. And let's face it, folks, we are just weeks away from the opening primaries. And apparently she's already starting to struggle with Noid-face Bernie Sanders, the Vermont Democrat socialist that believes that all people should just get free stuff, especially sauce. And when I say sauce, I mean something like Thunderbird Liquor or Mad Dog 2020. That stuff's really good. You know, those people don't like Clinton, and the reason they don't like Clinton is she's not far enough to the left for them. But they are already out saying that, oh, well, these attacks against Hillary Clinton, they're political in nature. They don't hold any water. It's all just made up. Folks, you don't make up keeping a private email server in a bathroom to conduct government business on that contains highly sensitive classified documents. To even suggest that's just some political targeting or some political hit job is beyond belief. But what do you expect from these frothing at the mouth left-wing extremist ideologues? That's all they know. That's all they know how to do, and that's all they will ever do. So, as we come up to the run-up of these 2016 elections, these things are just not going away. But, of course, people like Bernie Sanders, Nerdface there, are still attempting to claim that this is all politically motivated and to distract the voters from important issues. But, of course, what are the important issues to the radical and extremist left? Free college tuition and other nonsense. Yet, it really is important. And the national security implications from this simply cannot be ignored. Americans are concerned about terrorism. Need we forget that we were just recently attacked in the worst terrorist attack on American soil since 9/11, 2001? No. But they are just like the Wizard of Oz. They pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That's what that comes down to. But it doesn't matter. This sort of thing leaves us vulnerable and open to attack. Nonetheless, the utopian socialists couldn't care less. They don't care about the American people. They've never cared about the well-being of the American people or the well-being of the nation overall. One of the things that Schindler notes, which is absolutely poetic in its deviousness, is that Hillary expressed surprise while using her private email server that a State Department staffer was using personal email for work. Hey, Hillary, why are you surprised? They're probably looking at you and saying, hey, that's a good idea. If she can do it, why can't I? Well, that's the problem. That's the problem when you have a nation of people and not of laws. That is why our founding fathers designed our country to be a nation of laws, not of men. But these people don't care. So anyway, you see, folks, there really is a disconnect from reality with Team Clinton. They honestly think that a different set of standards should apply to everyone else and not to themselves. That's the sort of thing that should clearly demonstrate that Madam Clinton is absolutely unfit to be America's next commander-in-chief. Of course, the frothing at the mouth left-wing lunatics will overlook this as they always have. It's like they have this reality distortion field around them, that they simply cannot admit the truth for what it is, and they will go out of their way to hide and obfuscate and to escape responsibility for the truth. And that, too, should come as no surprise to anyone. I have to say, despite Tingle's Chris Matthews attempting to double down on his quest to find the difference between a socialist and a modern Democrat, the real question should be of a different nature. What he should be asking Madam Clinton is whether she really believes that government officials are above the law or not. Of course, such a question is merely rhetorical in nature, because we all know what the answer is. The evidence is there for all to see. How could Madam Clinton be worried about a staffer using personal email for governmental affairs when she was doing the exact same thing? There it is, folks. That's it. That's it right there. That's what's so laughable about all of this. She really doesn't think she's done a blessed thing wrong. Yet we all know the truth is that she has. And we really should be holding the former Secretary of State accountable for all of her misdeeds during her tenure with this Obama regime. But you see, right there's two things. She's a Clinton, and this is the Obama regime, so she's not going to be held accountable. Now, maybe the voters, and I pray that the voters won't give her a chance here, but that's what's happening right now. And it's an ugly picture. It's an ugly statement about the current affairs in the United States as I speak to you. And folks, it just does not show any signs of getting any better any time in the near future. Alas, as we all know, the regime will do everything within its power to protect Madam Clinton. It wouldn't help them in the 2016 presidential elections if they were to allow her to face punishment for this. That's why you see Nerdface Sanders going out of his way to attempt to brush off this serious scandal. And isn't it funny that the left always tries to brush off serious scandals, but then if it goes to their propagandistic message, they're going to double down on it and use that for their benefit? Well, that shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, because it's totally in line with Joseph Goebbels' tenets of propaganda. And I know that Jeremy and I have mentioned that frequently on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, but it's very important to point this out because, folks, the tactics that are being used here are no different than the tactics used by the National Socialist German Workers' Party or Nazi regime in the 1930s and World War II. And that is certainly not the type of system that would work well here in the United States. It's not something that we should adopt. It goes against the shared national character, spirit, heritage, and identity of the American people. But to a person like Nerdface Sanders, that doesn't matter, because let's face it, he's probably got a lot of skeletons in his closet too. They just think that anyone that wants to follow the rule of law are a bunch of radical nincompoops that shouldn't have any say in government whatsoever. And of course, we see that backed up by the way that the students in this supposed million student march have acted. They want to clamp down on freedom of speech. Oh, well, if it's offensive, then we shouldn't have it. Yeah, if it's offensive, we shouldn't have it. And that totally disregards our freedom of expression, which is guaranteed by our shared First Amendment. But again, this all interrelates to one another. It all ties in together. And, you know, even though Nerdface Sanders wants to brush this under the rug, and ever since the Clintons held the White House in their grips back in the 1990s, scandal has followed them around like a shadow. And let's be honest, folks. Their reputation has tarnished the highest office in the land. And Obama is continuing the legacy of deceit, corruption, and criminality. There absolutely can be no question that what Obama's doing is a continuation of the type of lackluster approach to legality that we saw at the height of the Clinton years. But are you going to hear this from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media? Of course not. Of course not. We're not going to hear anything about that because that would go against their propagandistic message once again. All they really care about is their twisted and radical left-wing extremist agenda. and they will double down on anything that will make their candidates look better and make our candidates look worse. But as if they needed the help, the gutless opposition party is being spineless, feckless, ineffective, and inefficient as usual. And so it really does leave us in a position of where we have to ask ourselves, why even have an opposition party under these circumstances? Because everywhere we turn, it appears that the gutless opposition party, or GOP, is not working in the best interests of the American people. Hell, they are squandering the mandate that was handed to them in the midterm elections of November of 2014. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. They have squandered this opportunity, and they continue to do so. Why? Well, there really isn't much difference between the parties anymore. They both worship at the altar of statism. They both believe that the government should have absolute control. They just disagree over the rate of speed at which we achieve the goal of absolutism. So, as always, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are running cover for the Clintons and the regime. They don't want their darling standard bearers to be seen for who they really are. That would be disastrous for them. The media is complicit, if not outright collaborative. And let's face it, folks, they are outright collaborative in these efforts. There are no journalistic standards or any type of journalistic integrity anymore. There's just a bunch of backroom cronyism and blatant propaganda. And, you know, people like Adolf Hitler would be very proud of what we see from the likes of the salivating mainstream media and the Clinton camp. They'd be very proud of President Obama's extra-constitutional attempts to strip decent, law-abiding American citizens of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. This is just par for the course for radical statists that believe that the state should control everything and that the individual is unimportant. But that's the way that any form of socialism works. It disregards the individual. It pushes the individual down to uplift the almighty state. But that is not what our founding fathers envisioned when they devised this country well over 2 centuries ago. It is not the message or the natural law tenets of our shared constitution. It is totally out of line with that. And as Jeremy and I and our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, have pointed out time and time and time again, Article 6, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution clearly states that the Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land, and all of these actions on the parts of nefarious scoundrels like Madam Clinton, and indeed this Obama regime, are diametrically opposed to the clear and concise language contained within the 4 corners of our shared Constitution. Therefore, their actions are per se illegal. But once again, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media won't touch that with a 10-foot stick. They just won't. So, the thing that gets even worse for Madam Clinton was put out in this piece by Schindler. Apparently, she ordered a staffer to send classified talking points for an approaching meeting via a non-secure fax machine, with the documents stripped of their classification markings. Folks, what you see here is just absolute laziness. Absolute laziness. They just want to cut corners because, oh, ho is hum, the laws don't apply to me. Again, it just shows that the Clintons absolutely believe this mythology that somehow equal protection under the law means that the law doesn't apply to them because, to steal from George Orwell here, all animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And in the case of the Clintonistas, Hillary must think that she's more equal than others. That is the situation that the United States of America finds itself in right now. That is what the salivating mainstream media is attempting to put forward with respect to Hillary Clinton. And then they're just saying that anyone who wants this investigated, anyone that wants to hold the Clintons and the Obama regime accountable for their criminality are just radicals, lunatics, someone to be thrust aside and not listened to whatsoever because clearly they're off their rockers. But no, that's not the case. So, the fact that she removed the classification or, classified markings on this document and sent it over a non-secure fax line is a blatant and definite violation of federal law. And if it weren't a Clinton involved, it would be a career-ending act. But we must recall that we're talking about Madam Clinton here. She is a darling of the corrupt government and regime. So they'll run cover for her, just as they always do. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee has called this July 2011 incident of faxing classified material via insecure fax machines as disturbing. Well, no, duh. Of course it's disturbing. But what are you going to do about it? You're a member of the detente wing of the gutless opposition party. What are you going to do about it? Well, I think we know. I think we know because there is a well-developed set of evidence and pattern of conduct with respect to the gutless opposition party when it comes to matters of this nature. They'll do nothing. They do nothing. What is the gutless opposition party going to do about it? Do I even really need to ask that question? I think we can all look at the recent actions of the so-called GOP with respect to any and all scandals that surround this regime to find our answers. Whether it's Operation Gunrunner or Fast and Furious, the gutless opposition party barks loudly, wrings their hands before the cameras of the salivating mainstream media, and then does, wait for it, absolutely nothing. That's right, folks. We can expect the gutless opposition party to sit on their hands like the bunch of petulant children that they are. At this rate, I'm sure many of you are asking yourself, why even have an opposition party? It's a good question. Both parties are complicit in the steady march away from our shared Constitution. They both seek opportunities to expand their power and influence at the expense of the ultimate wielders of sovereignty, we the people. There's nothing new about this whatsoever. Absolutely nothing new about it at all. Like I said, it's been with us ever since Obama first assumed power back in January of 2009, and dare I say it goes back to the Clintons when they held the White House back in the 1990s. But it's even worse now. They're allowed to get away with highway robbery now. Nevertheless, there's even more damning evidence against the former Secretary of State which has surfaced. In a just-released email, which thus far has garnered relatively little attention, there is a major breach of protocol. This comes from Sidney Blumenthal and is dated June 8, 2011. The topic of the email centers around Sudan and contains explosive material. It includes detailed intelligence reports from Blumenthal, who ran a private intelligence service which oftentimes supplied Madam Clinton with juicy intelligence. His normal go-to source, Tyler Drumheller, who was a former CIA senior official and veteran spy, who, oddly enough, with the Clintons, suddenly and conveniently died just before Emailgate became a serious problem for Madam Clinton. It appears that he didn't have anything to do with this. With this particular piece of information, it carries none of the hallmarks of being a Drumheller report. The emailed memo mentions that there could be attacks by guerrilla forces coordinated to attack some other forces holding oil in Abyei. What's more, it seems to suggest that the dissidents are cooperating not only with each other, but the governmental forces in the region. So apparently Sudan's government has developed some sort of super secret plan in coordination with not one, but two rebel groups in order to gain access to the oil reserves in the hotly contested region of Abyei. So, just how in the hell did Sidney Blumenthal, who hasn't been in government since the Clintons held office, get his hands on this? And why would Clinton need to get this intelligence from Sid when she already had security clearance for the most top secret and sensitive material around? The whole thing reeks of corruption and cronyism. But folks, is that really surprising? We have to once again keep in mind that we are talking about the Clintons here. The Clintons have had scandal following them around like a shadow. And do we really want to put another Clinton in the White House? Do we want to have a repeat of the disastrous tenure of Bill Clinton? I think the answer is open and obvious. I think the answer is clearly no. But you're not going to get that from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. They're going to double down on their efforts. They're going to do whatever it takes to protect Madam Clinton from the consequences of her dastardly and nefarious deeds. That is the type of reality that we are facing in the United States of America today, and it is absolutely grotesque and sickening. So, what's amazing is that even this Schindler character, a former agent with the National Security Agency, or NSA himself, was astonished by the detail of the report. He remarked that it was also stunning that Blumenthal was able to get this information to Madam Clinton a mere 24 hours after the incident occurred. You know what sticks out about this to me? If she could get this kind of intelligence this rapidly, why were they not able to respond to the situation on the ground at Benghazi, Libya this quickly? Of course, the answer is that they didn't want to. The entire Benghazi incident reeks as well. But so does anything and everything that this woman touches. She's corrupt to the core. And once again, this all just clearly demonstrates that she is not qualified to be President of the United States. Of course, the GOP will claim that they will make headway with this, when nothing could be further from the truth. They don't want to do anything. They haven't done anything. And that's a major part of the problem. Just like every other offense by this Obama regime, the gutless opposition party is simply ignoring their well-established powers, which are used as a check and balance against a rogue regime like the one we currently have. They are complicit to the point of collaboration. You know, the Daily Observer piece, or rather the Observer piece, notes that this particular email memo comes directly from a high-ranking source with access to Sudan's top military intelligence officials. Blumenthal also went to extraordinary measures to vouch for the credibility of the document. But what's even more amazing is that the State Department chose to label this document as not classified. Why? When it obviously holds very sensitive material that could cause further destabilization in one of the world's most unstable hotbeds? The answer, once again, rests with exactly who is in the middle of this entire incident and quagmire. Everything Clinton does has an air of corruption about it. Time and again, she skirts the rules and somehow manages to get away with it. Of course, who wouldn't expect this? That's the well-established pattern with not only this regime, but the Clintonistas. They flaunt their corruption because they know, deep down, they absolutely know, that the gutless opposition party won't do a blessed thing to hold them accountable. This is the sort of nonsense that makes my blood boil. It's a complete and total disregard for the rule of law. We know that Trey Gowdy won't do anything. He's a toothless bulldog with indigestion. That's not what the American people expected when they handed the GOP a mandate back in the midterm elections of 2014. Once again, the gutless opposition party has pushed us overboard in the swirling rapids of betrayal, deceit, and corruption. Schindler says that another email from about June 7, 2011 demonstrates that Sidney Blumenthal had access to NSA material. As a former NSA agent, Schindler is intimately familiar with the way their Signet intelligence reports are written, and claims that the information about the Sudan incident carry all the hallmarks of such a report. That, of course, raises the serious question again of how on earth was Blumenthal able to get his hands on such sensitive intelligence? Because, as I've already stated, he was not in governmental office. In fact, the Obama regime wouldn't allow him to be part of Clinton's Secretary of the State, underlings, minions. So, it's important to see that there is a lot of problems with what's going on with Clinton, and that these problems are of a very sensitive nature that could be very explosive when it comes to national security. And once again, the salivating mainstream media is going to run subterfuge. The gutless opposition party is going to sit on their hands twiddling their thumbs, and Elijah Cummings is going to come out and say that this is all just made up and political. If this is not just corruption run amok, I don't know what is. So, of course, the other thing that all of this shows is, once again, the NSA snooping program is a bad idea, irrespective of what El Jefe Jeb Bush and dubious Marxist Rubio claim. If they are allowing sensitive intelligence, they being the NSA, information to leak to someone like Blumenthal, what in the hell is preventing them from abusing the sensitive information of American citizens? I think we all know that the answer is not a blessed thing. Not a blessed thing. You see, folks, government is inefficient, corrupt, and devious by nature. They are not looking out for the best interests of the American citizenry. Rather, they are using all of this crap for political gain. That's just what they believe. That's what they do. That totally ties in to their modus operandi, and it really has no place in an open and honest society like the United States. And it's just staggering, shocking, and very unfortunate to see that the United States has fallen into this type of chicanery. So, maybe the reason why Marco and Jebo want to use this stuff is they want to be able to silence any of their opponents. Kind of like what Madam Clinton is doing. And they're willing to break the law to get this information. Folks, once again, this clearly demonstrates why it is one of the utmost importance, or it is of the utmost importance, for us all to have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and our fundamental and unalienable rights. Such a knowledge allows us to peel through the layers of subterfuge and to get at the truth. The truth is, Hillary is corrupt. There are massive intelligence breaches at our supposedly most secure agency, and our fundamental and unalienable rights hang in the balance. And what are we going to see from the gutless opposition party? Just more of the same. More of the same. Not doing a blessed thing. So, folks, you cannot make this stuff up. It's there, as plain as day to see. And the minions of Uncle Sam are doing everything within their power to let this slide. Again, the elitists on Capitol Hill think we're too dumb to figure out what's really going on here. They hold us in the utmost contempt. And it's glaringly obvious. But we, here at the Wright Flyer, do not hold you in contempt. We're trying to empower you. by showing you the truth of what's going on everywhere we turn. Things with this government tend to go from bad to worse, and there are no signs of it getting any better at any time in the near future. You know, Madam Clinton's concerns aren't just limited to Emailgate. According to ABC News, the Clinton camp appears nervous over a threat from Noid-Face Boynbay Sanders. Sanders has steadily been rising in the polls and managed to gain growing support. It's to a point now that Madam Clinton simply cannot ignore it. We are mere weeks away from the first votes being counted in Iowa and New Hampshire. And what's telling is the Clinton camp seems more anxious than ever about the pivotal primaries. Earlier in the week, Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, my God, I really can't make these names up, folks. Anyway, Robbie Mook rushed out a fundraising email to supporters with the subject tag of, quote, nervous, close quote. Now, that's not something you'd hear or see from someone who is confident that their campaign is doing well. Rather, that is a sign of growing anxiety. And it's sort of funny when you stop and think about it, folks. Clinton just isn't as popular as she'd like to paint herself out to be. But how could she be? She's a walking magnet for scandal and intrigue. And not intrigue in the good sense, mind you. She's radioactive. The letter states there's a situation developing in Iowa and New Hampshire that could change the course of this election. Okay, so what? Well, 2 days after the first campaign fundraising email was sent out, they followed up with another one which mentioned seriously tight polls in New Hampshire. And it's important to remember that New Hampshire basically borders Bernie Sanders' fiefdom in Vermont. So, apparently, Fox News released a poll which shows Sanders has edged ahead of Clinton in New Hampshire by about 13 points. Of course, polling data is not what I'd call trustworthy. Most of the polls that were conducted in the 2014 midterm elections turned out to be flat out wrong. But the salivating mainstream media doesn't care. They want to sensationalize everything. And, you know, as I showed in my solo flight special talking about the salivating mainstream media, I pointed that this goes all the way back to William Randolph Hearst and yellow journalism. They just absolutely adore sensationalism. With respect to the Democratic Socialist Party in the 2016 presidential election, there is hardly a distinction between drunkard Sanders and sexist Clinton. Really, their policies are like carnival mirror reflections of one another. This is not the sort of leadership that America wants. And I have a feeling that the American people don't want to see a continuation of Obama either. His tenure has been nothing short of disastrous. And the American people are not feeling confident about the direction in which the country is headed. I know Jeremy and I have said that the economy is not of great importance, and that the weak economy is but a mere symptom of what's happening with respect to the overzealous government. But I do need to make a connection to a particular school of economic thought that works against the constitutional approach to our representative Republican system of government. Since the inception of this country over 200 years ago, the American people have held an inherent distrust of any central form of government. The entire American War of Independence centered around a conflict against the central authority of the British Crown. Taxation and mercantilism were the main specters of that era. The Crown wanted to control everything, and the colonists were not about to have any part of it. So our founding fathers took painstaking measures and efforts to make sure that the central government of the fledgling United States of America held as little power as possible with respect to economics, with respect to policy, with respect to taxation. This meant that the government didn't interfere or intervene with respect to market conditions. They believed that a free market would be able to handle itself and correct itself. However, what we see with the utopian socialists is that they want to dabble in a discredited school of economics. What school of economics do I speak? I speak of Keynesian economics, which derives its name from British economist John Maynard Keynes. Now, folks, bear with me here as I go into a little bit of economic drivel, because I do think it's very important that this get covered. Prior to Keynes, mainstream economic thought focused on the state of general equilibrium within the economy. It was argued, as it had been by our founding fathers, that everything produced will eventually be consumed at the time the appropriate price point is discovered. Thus, individuals produce so that they can consume what they have manufactured or sell such output in order to gain someone else's output. This is classical capitalism at its finest. It works, and it ensures greater freedom for the individual. Well, John Maynard Keynes wasn't going to have any of it. For Keynes, there was absolutely no guarantee that individuals produce goods which would be met with demand. He argued unemployment was a natural consequence of economies contracting, and that the government should step in via increased social spending to address the problem. But you know what? Unemployment would be the result of putting out a product that the market didn't want. Unemployment would be the correction. Unemployment would be the incentive for those who didn't put out something that somebody wanted to discover something new. Government doesn't need to fix that. That should fall to the wherewithal of the individual. Government tampering with that would allow something that is subpar to continue and would bear down against competition, which is the lifeblood of classical capitalism. But Keynesian economics doesn't believe that, doesn't follow that thought process whatsoever. So, he said that the government should step in with increased social spending to address the problem. You know, it's this sort of nonsense that created the bubbles that burst in 2007 and 8, and before that, the technological bubble of 2000. The government subsidizing certain things to give them a certain value, and then it didn't work. The financial meltdown of 2007 and 8 still haunts us to this day, and President Obama has doubled down on this sort of economic thought, which has only exacerbated the problem. At the heart of Keynesian economics is a proposed solution to the Great Depression. Keynes argued that the government must stimulate the economy. In other words, take more of your money and spend it on things that you wouldn't buy, that wouldn't benefit you, that somehow stimulates the economy. It fosters this whole notion of the government knows what's best with your money and you don't. That's Keynesian economics, folks. Right to it. You know, at the heart of Keynesian economics is this idea that the inducement to invest should become, a part of government policy. And he applied a combination of two approaches. Firstly, reduce the interest rates as per monetary policy. And secondly, governmental investment in infrastructure or fiscal policy. You know, the very thing we're seeing with the Fed right now. But this results in rampant inflation and increased unemployment. Why? Because increased social spending results in higher taxes, which results in lower profit, and businesses cut back to prevent further hemorrhaging of money. Keynesian economics doesn't take into account the individual's thoughts or concerns. In a very real sense, it is another form of collectivist mentality. And that is a huge and major shortcoming for it. It shows that it would not be good for the country at large, and certainly not for individuals. Our founding fathers believed that the individual should have complete control over their products. That's an integral part of the notion of popular sovereignty. An individual cannot be sovereign if the government is regulating what they can or cannot produce or sell to such an extent that it controls government policy. So Keynesian economics actually goes against the letter and spirit of our shared Constitution. Is it any wonder, then, that some of the most socialistic regimes in this country, FDR, Wilson, and the current regime, for example, followed some form or fashion of a Keynesian model? Of course not. Keynesian economics increase the clout and power of the government, and that plays into the hands of these left-wing fanatics. And let's not forget that John Maynard Keynes was one of the architects of the war reparations put against Germany in the Treaty of Versailles. Yeah, this brilliant economist helped bring the Second World War onto us. After he finally did the accounting and realized, oh crap, this is going to cause a problem, he tried to stop it, but by that point he had already submitted his algorithm for calculating the reparations. And thanks to his actions, Adolf Hitler rose in Nazi Germany, socialism started to spread, and we were plunged into World War II. Keynesian economics is a disaster, and it should not be adopted in the United States. Yet, that's who we have in the Fed right now, a blatant, frothing at the mouth Keynesian economy. So, let's look at one of the other things that Keynes rejected. Keynes rejected people saving their money. You know, that's funny. That's laughable. He labeled this as excessive saving. So, saving beyond planned investment somehow encourages recession or depression. Since when did smart fiscal policy encourage a recession? So he argued that interest rates should be kept artificially low to encourage spending. And if spending didn't increase in the private sector, then the public sector should start spending like a drunken sailor. Well, this makes people like Madam Clinton very happy. All they want to do is increase spending. After all, one must recall that Nancy Pelosi said that the best way to lower debt is to spend. Now, stop and think about that for a moment, folks. Let's take you personally, or me personally, or Jeremy personally. If we spent money that we don't have, in other words, excessive borrowing, would our debt go down? The answer is no. And the same holds true for governments. But Keynesian economics ignores this and encourages the sort of wasteful spending that we see within the public sector. With respect to Bernie Sanders, he wants to increase spending by some $10 trillion. You see, folks, Keynesian economics is part of the problem. The adherents to this school of thought do not believe that the free market can achieve equilibrium. As opposed to allowing the market to correct itself with the invisible hand, laissez-faire economics, they use the heavy hand of government to corrupt the free market. This is the sort of meddling that leads to increased taxes and to a reduction in hiring. Obamacare demonstrates an operation of a Keynesian approach. Now, some claim that this approach to economics works because it claims to focus primarily on the individual private sector, only turning to the government in times of recession. And pink unicorns fly out to fighter jets' exhaust. The problem is, Keynesian theory doesn't resolve economic downturns. It worsens them. The Great Depression was lengthened and worsened by Roosevelt's New Deal, which was absolutely a practice of Keynesian economics. It also led to horrific infringements on the right to property in such Supreme Court cases as Wickard v. Filburn. Remember when a farmer couldn't produce for his family because that would negatively impact the economy, the market? Because that's interstate commerce apparently now, growing food for your own family. You see, that as per Keynesian philosophy, would be excessive saving. You can't save. You've got to spend to stimulate the economy. You can't do what you want with your money. That's Keynesian economics. It has no place in a free market society, a true capitalist society like the United States. You know, the less government interferes with the market and with the ultimate wielders of sovereignty, the better the economy will fare and perform. That's why during the initial century and a half of the United States' existence, the government never interfered with the private sector. Such governmental involvement was considered a gross violation of the principles of the Revolution. And it makes sense. The Crown sought to interfere with the colonists' ability to earn a living, and they sought extra taxes to support their massive interventionism. So, is it any wonder then that the Founding Fathers rejected the sort of interventionism that is the central core of Keynesian economics? I think the evidence speaks for itself. History has shown that such failed policies don't work. They don't have a place in a free and open society like that of the United States of America. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm sending the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. As always, folks, I'm your Captain Randy Wright, and I'd like to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. I also invite you to leave your comments or thoughts either here on our YouTube page or on our Facebook page or Google Plus page. I also invite you to join Jeremy and me the next time we take to the friendly airwaves, leaving you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, as we always do. Thank you again, folks, and do take care. Thank you for flying the Wright Flyer.